Okay, great. Cool. Yeah, so we are on your channel. We are
Oh,
live.
well, everybody on YouTube, then welcome to you as well. And for everybody, I guess I'm kind of for 2.5 minutes, I'm going to introduce my friend Evan Greger. I've already probably sent you some kind of promotions about this and some descriptions in my words about what Evan does as an EFT practitioner. I am not an EFT practitioner, but I am a person with feelings. I am a musician who has many feelings, feelings that I've had for decades that have contributed to me, struggling with self-judgment, inner criticism, and the way that that shows up as anxiety, anxiety that stops me from moving forward, stops me from practicing. It contributes to me procrastinating or being, let's say, just not my best version of myself. Like when I'm interacting with other people, whether it's students, other musicians, in my business, in my family, parenting. So learning different ways to respond to feelings. Like I've learned a lot about that from Evan in the last couple of years. I've personally hired Evan, paid him money to work with me one to one. And inside of my Creative Strings Academy, because I believe in him so much, so I hire him regularly to to lead sessions inside of the academy for members as well. And so I've actually I've watched Evan do these presentations and I've watched him help people for many years, and he just gets better and better at it. So I'm
Good.
super stoked for everybody to experience it. So I'll probably mute myself, Evan, and then turn off my videos just so I don't get in the way when you get started here. Is that good with you?
Oh yeah, yeah, you can control that, right? You mean just you'll just
Yeah,
turn your video off.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah, no problem at all. And you're always welcome to interject in the middle. Let me make sure. Okay, you saw that. You see the slide change, right?
I don't see any slides yet
Oh, you're
currently.
are
Well,
are
wait,
those
because you're stirring. Wait, oh, I can move back and forth.
okay?
Okay, so I have control to go between. So yes, I do. I see
Okay,
your
great.
screen. Just change the slide one more time just so I can check and make sure.
I saw it because it's YouTube's on a delay,
Okay.
so it's working.
Okay, great. All right, I'll mute myself and I'll get out of the way. Let me know if you need anything.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's 6 o'clock now, so let's start this out. Maybe if you want to record a backup, Chris, on your side too, I'm going to record.
You got it.
Okay, welcome everybody. It's great to be with you all today. We're talking about from fear to flow. We're really talking about breaking cycles, cycles of inner criticism, self-comparison, and the various fun things that we face as humans, but as musicians. So our goal for today is to help you understand why we get into some of these emotional loops, fear, self-criticism, pressure on yourself, etc. Some of the unique ways that that can manifest for creative people. Tools to break out of these cycles of thought and emotion with some evidence-based practices, including tapping, which you may have heard of. If not, you'll see some of it. And I'll do a little bit of group processing based on what you put in the chat a little later, and work with some volunteer or volunteers, time permitting, one-on-one, so you can see this in action. So just a note: I'm not a mental health professional medical, so this is not medical advice in any way. And I totally appreciate that some of the things I might say might be kind of oversimplified, right? There could absolutely be situations going on that are far more complex as for what's going on for different people emotionally. So just consider this a framework, a sort of basics that can be, and some tools that can be useful for working with emotions. But if you're uncomfortable at any part during any of the explorations or anything else, we can't see you, we can't see your eyes or what's going on. So take a break, just observe, do whatever feels right for you. So if any of these sound familiar, I think you'll get value from this. If you ever feel like your playing is not good enough chronically, or you feel that every once in a while, you get stuck over small mistakes or imperfections, that's me in a big way, or maybe I should say was. Always feeling behind or like you should be practicing more, comparing yourself, feeling like you don't measure up. You're super stressed when you're busy, but when you have time off, you're anxious. I should be working more. I need more students. You beat yourself up. You struggle to stay motivated. If none of those sound familiar to you, please speak up because you're a very rare human, and you should be teaching this. So here's a hypothetical ideal situation I put forward, right? Which is we have our love of music. The love of music makes us listen to music that we like. And hearing music we like, or pieces of music, it's an inspiration. Makes us want to pick up the instrument. We want to sound like or play the music we love, which gives us a reason to practice. Right? It's enjoyable or it's focused. And then we might perform if you're a professional, or just play for yourself, rest, integrate. Okay, feeds the love of music, and this lovely circle of life just continues. And of course, that's an ideal, and things are not always ideal. Things get colored, right? And colored for different reasons, various ways. So I put that what I notice a lot is the love of music turns into more of like, yeah, I love music, but there's a need to play well, right? If you're studying, if you're in college, whatever, a little morphs. Okay, I need to be good at this. So the listening can have more of a comparison quality. How am I going to do that? Scrolling, social, etc. And if it's your career, judging your career as well as your playing. So that can lead to self-judgment, which can derail the whole thing, right? Total lack of motivation at this point. Or, it might continue the practicing in a little bit more of a forced manner, a little bit of more pressure on yourself during the performance, which fuels that need to play well, fuels the judgment. So you can bounce around any of these. And my experience is we sort of vacillate at different times. And you can, let me know in the chat if you relate to anywhere in that cycle. So some unique challenges that musicians face is your playing might relate to your career, your paycheck, your livelihood of yourself or your family, or your academic success, which our brain will translate into, my future. So now survival can get hooked up to this stuff as well. It's not just passion, it's not just a hobby. So survival mechanisms can actually start to amplify the whole process. We love music, we want to play many styles. At least in my case, jazz bass player, diversity is very important. So it can turn into like there's so much to learn, so much to practice. It can be a type of overwhelm. And for us, there's a performance element, right? Even if you're teaching, there's like kind of being on for your students, possibly feeling like you're being judged. So that's another layer that can add some different elements of stress or, anxiety to the whole process. So we'll talk a little bit here about triggers, which we each have various triggers in our musical lives, of course our personal lives too. And a super simple definition, anything that creates an adverse emotional response, anything that creates that emotional response that you don't like, say that triggered me. These triggers help change the color of our relationship to music, like in that wheel, right? Our career, etc. So here's how it might play out and kind of help feed a certain negativity loop. Right? So, okay, I need to play well, or I want to play well, etc. If you're a professional or a teacher, you might be looking at an empty or light calendar, right? So, okay, I don't have a lot of gigs, or I don't have a lot of students. The calendar can be a trigger, right? And that's, okay, I need to make some money. That can bring up different emotions, right? Or just even the thought, okay, music is my career now. I need to make money being a musician. That can be a trigger. There might be things you learned. You might have heard things when you were younger, anyone? Like, oh, it's hard to make money as a musician. So that thought can be a trigger. Now, that can lead to some comparison. Okay, how am I doing? Who else is doing better? Why are they getting so much work, right? This person is way busier than me. That can bring up anything, can bring up shame and guilt as one example on the unpleasant side. So curious if anyone can relate to any of these types of things. If you're not a professional though, it could be your upcoming lesson, right? I want to play well for the teacher. That can bring up fear or anxiety, urgency. I need to practice for my lesson. That can be a trigger. The fact that the lesson is coming up or anything like that, right? So that makes sense. So just a side note about these emotions I mentioned, like anxiety, fear, they're not bad, how I experience or how I feel about them, even though they feel bad, right? They're protective mechanisms. They have a reason for being there. They're based on your past experiences. They feel bad, they're not bad, but you can try to get rid of them, which is not really the approach I like and not how I like to think about tapping. I do not think, let's tap away anxiety. I understand why we use that terminology sometimes, but That's a bit of an aside. We won't get much into that today. We do more in the workshop that Chris and I have that we will let you know about. So the musician trap, though, it's kind of interesting. When it comes to our emotional well-being, trying to break out of this loop, musicians will often turn to this. As someone who's been a musician in New York for 15 years or so at this point, right? If I just practice more and sound better, work harder, then my circumstances will improve. Then I will feel better. So it's like it goes right to, oh, just need to get better, need to practice better. Then I feel better. The problem for musicians is it actually does kind of work to a certain extent, except it's temporary, impermanent. The goalpost always moves. So it's actually still looking for an external cause to improve your emotional state, but it's subtle because it's not like, oh, I'm just grabbing some food or something. I mean, we might have those too, or complex, but practicing or getting better at music feels like, oh, it's self-improvement, right? But if I feel bad unless I sound good, how you're playing on your instrument that day is still, it becomes the source of what's going on in your inner world. It's not pretending you like when you sound bad. That's not what I'm saying. But your emotional state being that interdependent is tricky. And so it's not sounding the way you want. It becomes a trigger. Oh, I'm worthless. It can go that far, right? And we've probably seen that. I certainly have seen it. So we want to know how to break some of that trigger response loop. And you want to have a basic understanding of it and some practical how-to steps, just like when you're learning your instrument, right? This is a C scale. This is where it is on your instrument. These are the open strings. So we want some C scale type approach to working with your emotions. So remember the triggers again here. You need to play about the empty your light calendar, the upcoming lesson, seeing someone else with more gigs than you. These can be triggers. Like I said, for a college student, it could be upcoming recital, right? Or you're walking down the hall. Colleges are like trigger city, right? You're walking down the practice room, you hear someone who's a virtuoso. Oh, wow, okay, that can bring up all sorts of anxiety or shame or guilt. Negative experiences with teachers, right? What's really important about this, though, is you specifically have a unique, very personal response to any trigger. So the light calendar for one person is fear. Like, ooh, another person, it's like, oh, I need to get into gear. It can almost be an inspiration. Like, I thrive in adversity. Bring it on. Another person, it's crippling anxiety. And another person, it's just kind of matter of fact. It's like, okay, I need to send out more emails. I need to do this and that, but it's not super connected to your identity. Same when you hear someone sound better or being asked to improvise. Hey, improvise. Oh, that sounds fun. Okay, I haven't really tried this before. All the way to like abject terror, right? Complete fight or flight response. So because one person has the fight or flight response and another's like, oh, I'll try improvising, who cares? Generic advice is not usually helpful at all. Just work harder, just have fun, just improvise. Don't focus on what other people think. Good luck if this triggers crippling anxiety for you, right? Such advice is completely irrelevant, and people can even beat themselves up because, like, I know I'm not supposed to care what other people think. You can't control that. Just throw that aside. That's not what we're going to be talking about. No platitudes today. We want to look at this triggered response directly. And this can be surprisingly unfamiliar to a lot of us. I say sometimes to relax and respect what is actually happening. So not minimizing it, which you'll hear a lot, not positive reframe it, and not jump to an external solution, including practicing. Right? Many musicians jump to that immediately. Oh, I hate how I'm playing. Okay, I need to practice more. I need a better teacher. It's right to an external solution. So we're going to go through in just a moment, actually exploring feeling this, being present with it, respecting that it brings up crippling anxiety or self-judgment. And understand that this is not random. It does not mean you are broken. If you experience crippling anxiety and someone doesn't, your brain and your nervous system have linked certain experiences to certain stimuli. That other person could be terrified of something that has no emotional response to you. Right? There's no value statement in it. So when we're present with a trigger, really with our response to it is what we're going to be looking at now. But also present, there's exposure therapy element to tapping. We can begin the process of deconditioning, right? Not having the same response. So having tools to calm down and be present and be with our emotional response is powerful. And we will give you a recording of one at this also. We'll put it in the chat. But to go deeper than that today, I don't want you to just be able to have some kind of tool that lowers the anxiety that comes up virtually every time you improvise or look at your calendar, right? And even having that kind of puts you in the upper percentile in a lot of our culture, right? Like, okay, I know what to do, I know how to breathe, but I would much prefer that the calendar or improvising in front of someone actually no longer trigger the same anxiety anymore. And that is possible, right? I've seen it multiple times. I've worked with people who like couldn't get on an airplane, now they can. So I'm talking on that level, right? Not just like to feel a little less terrified every gig. That's not my goal for you in the long run. So let's try it a little bit here. And we're just going to do a light, gentle exploration. But again, if anything feels a little uncomfortable, just back off, just watch, just look around the room and don't worry about it, right? But some common triggers for musicians. So you can get in a zone now of just not like so much information taking in now. Just take a little breath if you're in a place to do so, and just sort of tuning into what your breath is like, becoming just a little bit more internally aware, because we're going to be looking at our internal experience of something. And I can let you know right now, this is not a test. If you're feeling like, uh-oh, that's actually useful to know that you have a relationship to these kinds of exercises or being asked something that's already like, am I going to do a good job? So you've already been triggered. You can notice that. Right? Otherwise, think of something like hearing a recording of yourself and it's not what you'd like. Hearing a recording of someone else and it's amazing. The light calendar, few gigs, few students, upcoming recital, upcoming performance, being asked to improvise, right? So you can choose one, or your mind may have already latched onto one, or stuff may have just started happening. So again, we're not trying to reframe this. We're actually not thinking of an external solution. Your mind is going to do that in many cases. Just let it do that. Let your mind do that. But I want you to start to become aware of what is the inward emotional experience when you think of one of these things that's triggering for you. So you could, for example, label it. I'd say there's a fear, there's an anxiety, I feel a pressure, I feel like I want to turn off this webinar right now. Whatever it is, you're just noticing it, and you're actually building some muscles here by bravely deciding, I'm just going to examine it. I'm just going to feel it. Not even try to do anything with it. You may be someone who feels things more in your body. So I'm curious if you notice any physical sensations, even if you don't experience particular emotional experience. So has your breathing changed at all? Have your shoulders tensed up? Has anything shifted even a little bit? And you may have a combination. Maybe like some fear and my shoulders raise. So I'm just curious, what did you experience? Anything coming up? You noticing anything? And just pointing out again, when you do something like this, even without any kind of breakthrough, you're setting something in motion to actually help reduce our stress responses to these triggers. You're not running to your mind. You're not running to an external solution. Okay, Chris. Yes, Chris, happy birthday. He's saying, I relate to all these triggers. Seeing someone play with more skill. Your heart. Chris is noticing your heart rate. Yeah. Someone else saying yes. Okay. Anyone else noticing any particular physical or emotional responses? You can let me know in the chat. And it's fine if you don't. But now, just give yourself a moment to kind of tune back in to whatever the experience might be for you. Could be that fear, could be that anxiety, could be just noticing the heart rate increase. And don't worry about like trying to really focus on it or lean into it. You can if you'd like. We got someone saying jaw locking, shoulder tense, sick feeling. Yeah, it's intense, right? Feeling of dread in my stomach, short breath. These are intense responses, right? These are almost like getting into fight or flight. So as you're feeling that, if you can see me, like right here on your collarbone here, right under it, like this clavicle bone, there's a little spot in there. You can just start tapping there. Not saying anything, not doing anything special. Just being present, not straining to be present. Like, okay, I got to really focus on this sick feeling. Nope. Just aware that it's there. We're not trying to get rid of it. We're not making it wrong. We're respecting, wow, isn't it interesting that the thought of someone playing better than me or the thought of this calendar creates a sick feeling in my stomach? That's kind of amazing how much information is actually embedded in that. And so literally just be tapping here. And as you continue to do that, if it feels good for you, let's talk a little bit about what's happening here. So this thing called EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique tapping, there's certain acupressure points on the body. Medical world wouldn't use acupressure point or meridian. The closest thing they have is something called the primo-vascular system. I forget the correct pronunciation, but in recent studies, they've shown that tapping these certain points, they send some calming signals to the brain, the limbic system, the nervous system. And this is actually, you can see this. You can see things on an fMRI of your brain imaging. And there are studies comparing it against a sham point. So if I tell you just tap random places on your head or like just wherever versus one of these points, it's a physiological observable difference, even with no skill, like how long you've been doing it. And you'll notice people have certain intuitive reactions to things like, oh, I'm rubbing my temples, like, oh God, I'm stressed. This is a point, right? Or shock, you might, right? There's a reason our bodies go to some of these places. And so, also, if you've heard of EFT tapping before, there's hundreds of trials now, more recently, clinical trials, including the treatment of serious conditions of things like PTSD. And, I've worked with, and I often do work with people with pretty severe cases of trauma. So this thing has moved from where you might have heard of it, from like, oh, it's this kind of energy thing, to we're past that point, right? This is increasingly recognized modality, even in clinical settings. I believe it's Australia where it's starting to surpass even EMDR as far as its perceived or demonstrated effectiveness in certain settings. So just to be aware of that. You may have heard of that, like, oh, isn't that weird thing that I see on YouTube? The medical term, for the acupressure point, yeah, I don't think it's for the point, but like, so Chinese medicine, acupuncture, they call these points meridians, and how it connects to the system. The closest thing I'm aware of in like more modern language is something called the primo-vascular system. That's not to say that like any doctor you talk to is going to say, yeah, I think it's the same, but it's a closest link. So I'm just curious, as you've been tapping, if you've noticed anything. Oh, cool. In Japanese, it's a tsubo. That's good to know. I'm going to start learning Japanese hopefully soon. So yeah, just noticing if you feel anything, and don't like become too analytical about it. Just notice if it has some kind of effect, because it does. It may not be a earth-shattering thing, but it's sort of similar. Like if you walk around the block, it doesn't mean you're out of breath, but stuff happened, right? Stuff happened with your blood flow and your heart. So, it's almost like, don't worry about it. We know now it does something. So that's a good tool to have, right? So there's there's a lot of EFT tapping rounds. Like I have a bunch on YouTube, but this is where you speak the words of your experience or what's going on for you or a particular topic as you go through. And so Chris and we have a free tapping specifically for musicians. We'll put a link to that in the description, and in the chat you can You can get that and just tap with that as much as you like. It was a little more centered on like judging yourself. You're practicing, like, am I not doing enough? I'm not sounding good, those kind of topics. So you can tap along with that video as much as you like. Oh, sorry, yeah, it's a little cut off. So kind of on your, like under that clavicle bone, like if the hard bumpy part of the bone, there's almost like a dent in there and in that sort of softer area. And by the way, if anything's physically uncomfortable, you can like lightly touch them. You can just kind of rub lightly. I've worked with some chronic pain people where you can't access all the points. It's fine. It's one point is not necessarily better than another. So how do we actually go much deeper here? Just for your reference, and we'll do a little of this later. So there's approaches that can rapidly accelerate this process. So for example, the light calendar, or someone's playing better than me or sounds better than me, right? I need to make money, or this person is busier than me. The emotion that can bring up. Okay, for me, it brings up fear. So light calendar, trigger, response is fear, urgency. If you explore that a little deeper, right, and questions, you might get this working with a practitioner, like, okay, where do you recognize this fear? Is this something you feel like you've felt before? Do you recognize this, for example? Right. And a hypothetical response could be, yeah, I've felt this. Remember when my parents would talk about money and there was all this like tension in the house or this anxiety. The interesting thing with this work is if you just kind of tap on things like, yeah, I feel fear around money. I feel fear around money. That's cool. That has positive effects, but nowhere as effective as tapping on, for example, yeah, that conversation, the look on my parents' face, the tension I felt when my parents were talking that way. It's very interesting that this is the case, but I don't want to call it a mistake, but a lot of people will assume that, so I should just work on my fear around money, right? But working on a specific event really touches on your triggers and your responses, because that's what it is. Right? Your brain, your neurology is triggered by a certain thing. And the thing that linked, oh, money is fearful, is not your empty calendar. It's not the thing that created it originally. Right? Unless you were like 4 years old booking your gigs. Right? It's going to be something earlier than that. So working on that level is deeper and more impactful. So it's cool to have breathing, grounding techniques to use when you're triggered or to calm down before a gig. You can literally just tap those points, but working at the level of origin is deeper and more effective. So that's sort of the introduction to this. Any questions, any thoughts? And we'll take a little pause, just sort of stretch, collect yourself, because what we're going to do next is some tapping together as a group. So I'll take things that come up in the chat and I'll do like a group round. You can see how it feels for you. They're fun to do. And they have a different quality and different benefits in some ways than when we do one-on-one, which we will also do. So it's far from amazing, the little image that's on the screen, but it's going to be easier to just watch me and tap where I tap. But yeah, so get yourself comfortable. And someone asked, would this help with dyslexia fears for reading music? The fear, I think we can say yes, right? One of my triggers, getting lost on the page, right? Like I at least don't say like, yeah, it can treat a condition necessarily, but the stress around it, EFT is definitely a good stress reduction tool. So the fear of, oh, okay, I'm afraid I'm going to get lost, right? And actually exploring that a little deeper, right? Does this fear remind me of something, right? Was I going to get yelled at? Was I not really following along so well in the classroom and I felt this anxiety? If there's younger events that you can link it to, per the last slide, that goes even deeper if you feel comfortable with it, if that makes sense. The stress and my overreaction on stage, if I do, this is like perfect for that, right? So when we have these types of reactions, right? Like, yeah, we all have things, right? Our brains are wired differently, but our reactions to those situations do not have to be so crippling. It's my hypothesis, at least, and experience so far. So for a little group tapping here, what I'm actually going to invite is exactly like you did, you shared in the chat here, any particular triggers you have with music, anything that you have recognized. You can do both at once. You can do just one side. You'll see some people do both. I do one at a time almost always, and I alternate simply because of like just mixing it up or not wanting my one hand to get overused. So yeah, take a breath, and you don't have to be deeply like connected to this trigger. Just put anything that comes up for you. That's like, yeah, I feel this makes me feel stress related to music. I think that's a good way to frame it. That way, there's at least an underlying connecting thread for all of us with stress. And what you'll notice is, as we're doing the group round, someone will share something and will tap on it, and you won't realize that you actually had that, but you will end up benefiting from it. That is one of the plus sides of doing it in a group. It's like, I didn't even know that I had a trigger around that. And it's like, I'm glad that person said that. I'm glad I did a group tapping on that. Okay, for lost. Okay, I got you. Okay, so when you get lost in the music, I leave my body. I get what you mean by that. Yeah, I'm not centered. I get stressed and stuff. So there's an anxiousness and a almost dissociation from your body. I'm afraid I'm going to get lost. So fear of getting lost in the music, or fear that happens when you notice yourself lost. I have some very vivid memories of that. Fear of my performance or teaching being bad, judged as bad. Okay, so specifically bad. Yeah. And you can feel free to get as specific or general as you like. Unwanted, disliked, disregarded, making a fool of myself. Yeah, those are pretty intense, right? So while teaching or performing, fear of being unwanted, disliked, disregarded, disconnecting from your body. The other musicians look at me on stage and be like, "Where did you go?" Okay, good. That's a specific aspect. Something we could put in the round here. Fear of losing skill. What do you mean by that, if you don't mind me saying? Fear of losing skill, like I need to keep practicing if I don't stay on it. Ooh, unhip and boring, not a real jazz player. Yeah. Fear of messing up and feeling like a fool. Okay. Yes. So the fear is based on your own, which is actually, again, a trigger response, because these are interesting to point out because, for example, some people get lost, and I've played with, everyone gets lost, by the way, like even amazing, brilliant musicians. Some of them laugh. Some feel like I deserve to be punished for the rest of the month. Right? So lost is like the trigger. Response is, I'm going to be a fool. Feel like a fool because I'm lost. Fear of memory lapse in a performance. Stress the fear of not being time to prepare for a gig. That is great. These are great. I wonder if anyone's already like, oh, yeah, when that other person shared that, I realized I feel some of that at times too. So I will do the round here as slightly more general with stress for the introduction, and I'll work in these different things. Fear of not getting gigs or work, and feel free to throw them out while I'm doing the round. I'll do my best to sort of incorporate them. And remember, this is being recorded. And if it's distracting for you to like try to follow me, you don't have to be matching. And you can even just pick the one point, like the collarbone point here, or like the side of your eye or the top of your head, and just do that. More important is that you're actually tapping a point and not matching me. So I think it's probably gonna be easier to see me if I stop the share. If you think that makes sense, if this makes it easier to just follow along with me. If anyone really wants me to put that back up, you can just let me know. So let's do it. And again, don't worry if like you don't feel like you know what you're doing here. Can't really get this wrong. Just tap where I tap and say what I say. Let's go to the side of the hand. This is like the meaty side of your hand here. Just tap there and repeat after me. Say, even though I'm feeling this stress, perhaps in more than one way, in these elements of music, but I'm open to having some compassion for myself and where these reactions might come from. So even though there's this stress, there's these physical and emotional responses that come up in me, and all these elements related to my playing, my teaching, my career, and as best I can, just open to honoring and accepting myself where I'm at. Even though there is a lot of stress here. Maybe it's not super triggered right now, but there are a lot of different elements to being involved with music that create different stress and anxiety in me, have different types of emotional consequences, career consequences. And I'm honoring the pressure this brings. And I choose to have some compassion for myself as best I can for where these triggers actually come from, and accepting myself as a human being who's just dealing with all of these complexities. And by the way, if you don't feel comfortable saying out loud or you're in a spot, just say them in your mind. If you can say it out loud, go for it. So now just following along still, tap where I tap, say what I say. Be refreshing some of the things that came in the chat here a bit. Just say all this stress, noticing the ways that my body responds, that my emotions respond to these different elements of music. Being a musician, a performer, educator, a student. Maybe I'm all of the above. This fear of sounding bad, whether that's bad by my judgment or the judgment of others. The things I might imagine them saying. Or maybe they're kind of polite, but what I imagine they're thinking. Oh, they're not so good. It's not such a great teacher. This is what they're playing is really unhip. Oh, this person sounds like they're not really a jazz musician. They sound like someone trying to be one. They sound like someone who doesn't play classical, but is trying to. By the way, if these feel awful, that's the point. Just to be clear, you're exposing yourself to things that feel bad while the tapping is sending a signal that you're okay. So if you're like, oh God, this feels terrible, I understand. You're not doing it wrong. Yeah. All these ways they might judge me. And all these fears I feel while performing. That feeling when I start to get lost. And it becomes terrifying. Like we're in a dangerous place now. We don't know exactly where we are in the music. Or I can't quite keep up with these other players. This is no longer a safe place to be. This is really scary. And I don't feel like I have a lot of solutions here. So I'm just going to check out. The safest thing for me to do is to basically leave my body. Because I don't want to run off the stage. But it's not safe to be in here experiencing this. And this is not because I'm bad or wrong. This is not a flaw in me. This is a response to what I perceive as being unsafe. All this fear of looking like a fool here. Like either because I'm lost or just the feeling like I'm going to mess up. But if I mess up, it's not just a thing that happens. It means I look like a fool. And I learned this somewhere. It's not a laughing matter to get lost or make a mistake. I will be judged as looking foolish, being seen as bad. And that's a lot of pressure to have on myself. But it's here for a reason. I learned somewhere along the way that if I'm not perfect, if I make a mistake, I will be looked at or talked to in a way that makes me feel foolish. So my brain and my body are trying to protect me from that. They might not know the best strategy for that. But that's what it's trying to do. Don't get lost. Don't make a mistake. So you better keep practicing. You better practice until it's perfect. All this desire for it to be perfect. All this pressure. I need to keep my skills up. I need to practice regularly and aggressively. Not necessarily just because I like music, but so I don't get judged. So I don't look stupid. And that might be why I feel some of this stress when there's not a lot of time to prepare. I may not be able to change the reality of that situation. Some gigs come in last minute. Sometimes life has curveballs. It often does. But noticing this association, that if I can't prepare and get it where I want it, the meaning that brings in, the meaning that has for me. If I don't sound as good as I'd like, which may be literally impossible. Noticing the reaction that says, I need to be afraid of that. If it doesn't sound good, I need to feel bad about it. Of course, I prefer it sound amazing. But some situations just are what they are. I'm just going to have to do my best. But that might not feel safe or okay. And I'm just honoring the pressure that brings up for me. And the fear that, what if I have to sight read on the gig? I can't really prepare for that in the way I might like. And so I'm just noticing all these feelings and opening myself to processing them. I don't even need to know what that means. I'm just giving myself this space to feel what I'm feeling, to honoring these feelings, that they come from somewhere, that I learned that this is the way to respond. And I'm open to the possibility that it may have very much been true that when I was younger, people would people would call me foolish. People would judge me. Maybe they even judged me a week ago. I'm just open to the possibility that it may not be necessary to have the same response I'm used to. I wonder if it's possible for me to still play music, to still do the gig, to still teach the lesson without as much anxiety around it. And I still might do everything I need to do as best I can. And all the ways I may have hooked up, that feeling fear and stress is a really good motivator. I should be afraid or concerned about how I'll be judged. Because if I back off, maybe I won't be as serious. Maybe I won't practice. Maybe I'll blow everything off. Maybe I won't focus as hard on the music if I'm not terrified of being lost. And I can respect if that message was absorbed. But I'm also open to experimenting, that it might not be necessary, that my system might be able to feel. You know, if I fear, or if I think about this a little less, if I focus a little less on the terrifying outcome, maybe I actually practice more. Maybe it actually gets easier. I might be open to playing with that a little bit, if it feels safe and okay. And if it feels appropriate, I'm also open to exploring some of the deeper layers that might be going on here, if that's relevant and right for me. Just choose to be curious about what best supports me so that I can feel more peaceful and relaxed, more at ease with myself, more able to enjoy and appreciate that I even get to play music at all, or teach it, or both. Alrighty, so now take a breath. And we'll just kind of tune in for a little bit, and I'll look for any comments, any thoughts about, like, did you feel anything? You feeling anything now? you might be feeling kind of spacey or something. You can take a moment to just kind of let that all process through your system. And it's okay. You're not looking for like cathartic breakthroughs necessarily, right? So just to emphasize that if you're connected in any way to what you're feeling, even if you think you're numb, because numbness is a feeling, sort of, by the way, and you're doing this, there's some benefit. Like I said, it's just like, you might not feel like you've run a marathon, but if you walk around the block in your neighborhood, there's benefits that take place, even if they're not, super obvious. So I would submit that as a reason to sort of explore some of these types of techniques of being present and even just tapping on a point, because again, the earth may not shift under your feet and you are never anxious again, but you're doing something that's good for you. So any thoughts in the chat? Nice comment here. The tapping immediately reminded me of soothing my daughters when they were babies. Very comforting contrast to allow staying with the uncomfortable narration. Beautiful, yeah. And that's exactly, right? If your young daughters are, when they're babies and they're crying, you don't intellectually explain to them, hey, I'm going to feed you later. Like, why are you crying, right? It's not a cognitive thing. It's an emotional thing. We often will relate to ourselves very cognitively. Why are you scared of sight reading or whatever? Versus like, hey, something in you is scared. It's upset. It's freaking out. It needs some presence. It needs some soothing. That's a lot of what we're doing in a way. Thanks for the
And
comment. Yeah,
if
Chris, yeah.
I understand this correctly, we're going to transition into a situation here where, first of all, folks, share any takeaways that you've got, any feelings that came up, anything that came up for you, share it in the chat. And probably, if I know Evan well, the next thing that he will offer to do is probably to go one to one with somebody.
Mhm.
If there is somebody here that wants to go one to one, which means, there's something that you're dealing with and you want to share it with him and have him help you tap through that in a one to one way. Now, when you do that, you can either, I believe, do it on screen and where you're talking, or you might be able to do it through chat or something like that. And you never have to share anything more than whatever you want to share. So it doesn't always have to be extremely specific. But anyway, if I know Evan, that's probably what's going to happen next.
I'm
And
up for it. Yep, absolutely.
and then he may only have time for one person, maybe two, depending on how long it lasts. But if even if you're not going one to one with him, chances are you'll get a lot by observing someone else who does. And if no one else does, then we'll find somebody that wants to, I'm sure. And remember that this is on YouTube, so it's public. So, but you can be off. You don't have to be on video if you don't want to. You can be, you know. So that's next. So we want you to share any thoughts that are coming up, any questions that are coming up. Now, if you've got something that's on your mind that you'd like to go one to one with Evan about, feel free to put it in there as well. And then that's the next thing we'll do. I want to share a couple links for you guys before we do that. And the first one is there's a free, another like group tap, like what we just did, that Evan has made that I think is great. And if you're already a member of the Academy, then you already have access to this. So you don't need to go to this link because you'll have it in your course area. But otherwise, anybody else, you can go to that link that I just put in the chat and we'll have in the description, and you can get this other free tap. You just put your email address in there and you'll get it. That'll also put you on like a special email list that tells us that you're interested in this. So we'll send you more stuff related to it. Also, I want to make sure that you know that you can work one to one with Evan if you want to. I have paid Evan before to work one to one with him. And I've recommended to friends and people that I care about a lot to work with him, and it's made massive breakthroughs for me emotionally that have impacted my business, my family relationships. It's been immense. So you can reach out to Evan if you want at his website. He'll probably put it in the chat here if you want that. Also, Evan has like like a program where he just does group tapping. So you can learn about that. If you're not already a member of Creative Strings Academy, then if you join my academy, then we do tapping every month, not only with Evan, but also with other people, Suzanne, who was here earlier. And you'll get access to our course that we created with several tapping. It's like a very extensive course that where Evan's doing a lot of this. And we'll also send you, I'll also put a link for you to join the membership if you'd like to do it that way. Or if you just want to buy the course, you can. And that is the end of my plugs. I will put those links in the chat and I'll let Evan take back over. Oh,
Oh,
actually, one last thing I wanted to say though is, and again, this is just me putting it through my filter, why I feel like I get so much out of this every time I do it with Evan. The things he said about respecting the feelings that you're experiencing instead of trying to force them away or pretending that they're not there. I always felt for me that like, like if I'm feeling afraid, I always felt like, oh, what kind of man would feel afraid, for
yeah.
example? And I'd be like, I just need to be strong and just like, wish that away, or something, or I'd be like, oh, I'm not afraid, just try to ignore it. That doesn't, neither of those things work for me. And so it feels counterintuitive, but it feels really helpful when Evan says, respect this feeling that you have and kind of develop a more collaborative relationship with it. And the analogy about the child I thought was really on point because a lot of times, and we'll talk about like how would you speak with a child? If a child came to you and said, I'm afraid, how would you speak with that child? And so every time Evan takes me through these tappings, that's my personal experience. I get a lot out of it because I'm not trying to force away. I'm not trying to speak down to myself or in a mean way to myself, but I'm like respecting these difficult feelings, and that then I'm finding a way to be more curious and have come to some compromise and a gentler relationship with them. And with that, I'll shut up. Go ahead, Evan.
No, it's fine. Thanks so much, Chris. Thanks for the kind words and letting everyone know your insights. And I don't see any hands, so if you do want to see it, I know Chris is sometimes willing to volunteer himself, but I will give just another moment to see if anyone wants to experience it. Again, you don't really have to share details. It's one of the interesting things about this approach. But I totally get it, if you don't want to be on a video that's, out there, so to speak. But just give yourself a moment, because if you're thinking maybe I want to do it, but I'm a little anxious, my experience with that usually means there's something very good. Something good is about to happen. If I get nervous before a session where I'm the client, that's usually like, oh yeah, it's because there's something really there ready to kind of be processed. That's not to like guilt you into doing it. I'm just something to be aware of. And I'm tapping here right now because that might help you if you're kind of on the fence and it's like, yeah, I kind of want to do this. I want to experience this, because it's very different than seeing it talked about, right? It's very different than even what the group tapping is. To see the actual back and forth of like, okay, we're going into more of a specific nuances, and it's to illustrate that difference between working on something more general versus something more specific. So yeah, you can also just say in the chat, I'd like to do it, or use the raise hand button. And so there's actually a couple questions, comments on YouTube here. Will this address nervousness while playing? I have worked a lot on reducing my anxiety before a gig, but occasionally I will start getting nervous playing a gig and not feeling nervous. So occasionally I will start getting nervous while playing a gig. Yes, I mean, yes, in the sense on two different levels. For one, depending on what instrument you play. If you're not playing, as a bass player, I could never actually like tap while I'm playing. But the nice thing about the collarbone point, for example, is it just looks like you're tapping tempo. You could just be doing this in tempo, right? And but as far as nervousness while playing a gig, you can also sort of make a note of what might be happening. For example, to just even remember what gig it was or when it was in the gig, and just replay it a little bit in your head and tap through that. And again, you don't have to like, go super deep into yourself necessarily to do that, because you don't always know what the trigger is. And of course, nervousness is a natural human emotion, right? So we're not saying like you should never experience it and this is a tool to never feel any type of nerves. But it's really fascinating because the thing that triggers nervousness on a gig could be something that's not even all that conscious to you. It could be like you noticed out of the corner of your eye someone with a certain body language. And it's just like something in your brain that reminds you of of like a certain teacher or something. So you don't necessarily have to dissect all that, but if you can kind of like remember the gig, like, yeah, I felt really nervous playing that tune. Or I got really nervous during the second set there, for example. I'll sometimes do that, right? I mean, and I've been doing this long enough that like I've noticed nobody actually cares. So I do this in public all the time. I also live in New York City where everybody's, this is not the least, how can I phrase it? Yeah. You see a lot weirder things than doing this on the subway. Yeah. Okay, cool. So Chris might have to ask you to volunteer, unless you think we should just call it. But I think it would be cool for people to see a
Oh,
demo of your
yeah,
gig.
I'm always down to volunteer. I always put myself on the chopping block. I want to give people last call if somebody else wants to do this, because we're not going to do more than one. So if you guys want to take advantage of this very valuable opportunity to go one to one with Evan, and I will just give you about 10 seconds while I post these final links here. And then I will definitely, if needed, I will be the sacrificial lamb. I'm happy to do it.
Okay, cool. Well,
All
yeah, I
right, so
don't see any hands.
it's going to be me. I'm going to be the sacrificial lamb here, and I'm going to just share like some things that I can really resonate with, the feelings that I experience, and that I also imagine other people can experience with, and so you can see what it's like to kind of be guided through the process, directly going one to one. And again, this is something that Evan offers. A lot of times he'll do group taps like he already did in our membership, but he'll also offer if people want to go one to one in the context of the group, or you can work one to one with him if you want to reach out to him. So, Evan, do you want to give me any specific prompts, or you want me to just dig?
No, I think it's best if it's like really real for you.
Okay.
And as a note for everyone here, like it's really common that it quote unquote goes off topic almost immediately. So in your own explorations of this, if you are saying like, oh, I get really anxious before every gig, and you start tapping and you're like, within 5 minutes, I'm thinking of my mom, that doesn't mean you're going off topic.
Right.
It's often right on. It's just hard to see why that would be connected. So you may see Chris and I pretty quickly go into other places,
Yeah.
it's good to know that for your own exploration of yourself.
Yeah. 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 Okay, good. Well, I think I have a topic. So, and this was something that I raised, which was, I think it's related to, so I'm 53. So, 20 years ago, I won lots of awards, and there's an aspect in which like I was getting better and getting better and getting better. And now I'm like a little bit afraid of like, well, maybe I'm not getting better. Maybe I'm declining, right? So that's part of it. And I think, so it's like that, am I good enough? Am I good enough? But also like, in the ways that I'm a good musician, are they even still relevant? Because there's younger people coming up in another generation defining even the language of music that I'm not even as present to as I was when I was 25. So the definition of hip, as Helen said, right, it's changing, right? Will I remain relevant? Will I, as a younger musician, maybe there was an aspect of me being young that I was maybe, let's say, attractive. Will I lose that? Will I be less attractive, even unattractive in every sense of the word, right? Like physically less attractive, like generationally, just my vibe, will it be less attractive, less relevant? My musicianship, will it be less relevant? Will I be less relevant as a teacher? The sense of decline, and also the way that that can impact my survival and my family survival. It might, I'm less gigs, blah, blah, blah. I haven't released an album in several years. I feel a lot of pressure to create things and to keep up with the pace of what people are creating on Instagram. You got people creating these great works, high production values, frequently posting, flawless, perfect. How can I keep up with that? Trying to write emails, trying to do social posts, trying to come up with new teaching ideas, trying to make, let alone a new album, right? These are some things that feel like real, like resonant pains for me right now. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, okay. So tuning into that for a second, if I lose skill, if I lose some relevance or a lot of relevance even, right? I know you mentioned that that could potentially impact your family, your livelihood, right?
Yeah.
But just kind of take a breath for a sec, and this thought, will I lose skill? Will I lose relevance? And seeing if family income is the first thing that comes up, if other things come up that join the party, so to speak.
There's an idea that I have of being kind of isolated or almost like, left out of the crowd, left out of the group. How about that? 'Cause it's like if I was in high school, I can imagine everybody goes to do something, but they don't think to call me. I wasn't invited to the party kind of thing.
So just to make sure, if you lose some of the skill and relevance, then you will be isolated. It brings up that feeling.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Do you recall actually experiencing or feeling that isolated sense in high school or younger?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
I do remember feeling that, feeling like yeah, like I wasn't the chosen kid. I wasn't one of the cool kids, or the yeah, in on all the jokes, invited first to the hangouts, that kind of thing. Sure.
Yeah. When you were winning awards and being recognized as exceptional on a certain level, what feeling did that bring up?
I think it brought up a feeling of security.
Okay.
Yeah, like security, and there's the opposite of security is the feeling like maybe I'm not secure.
Hmm.
Maybe my income's not secure. Maybe the stability of my life, the stability of my family, the stability of relationships, people that love me, maybe that's not secure.
Okay. Yeah. So just going back to that feeling of, okay, I feel isolated. I feel like I don't quite fit in here. And just tuning into that, any particular physical sensations, any other memories connected to that?
I think there's like I think I put it earlier, but like maybe a little bit of a cognitive like shutdown. Kind of
Hmm.
like going blank in my mind, or like there's like my mind's racing, but I can't really like latch onto things. There's also just kind of like a hyper, my body just kind of gets like hyper, almost like I don't know what the word is really, but yeah, yeah, it's like something hyper. My
Mm.
my body like there's like too much, like it feels like I'm gonna like explode a little bit.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So let's just start tapping here on the side of the hand. And so there's this feeling like you're going to explode almost. It's very high intensity. And this feels connected to when you're feeling isolated and possibly being left out.
Yeah,
Okay. Yes. Let's say, even though it feels like I'm going to explode,
even though it feels like I'm gonna explode,
like I'm being left out and isolated.
like I'm feeling left out and isolated.
And my body is telling me
My body's telling me
this is not a good thing that's happening here.
this is not a good thing that's happening.
We're going to explode.
We're gonna explode.
And I'm open to having some compassion for this feeling.
I'm open to having some compassion for this feeling,
So even though it feels like I'm going to explode,
even though it feels like I'm gonna explode.
this is really intense.
This is really intense.
When I'm being left out or isolated,
When I'm being left out or isolated,
this is not safe for me.
it's not safe.
Body feels like it's going to explode.
Body feels like it's gonna explode.
I choose to honor and accept myself as best I can.
Choose to honor and accept myself as best as I can,
So even though it felt like I was going to explode,
even though it felt like I was gonna explode.
and there may be even times now
And there may be times now.
where there is some sense of dread.
There's some sense of dread.
Maybe it's not exactly the same feeling,
Maybe it's not exactly the same.
Maybe it is.
Maybe it is.
But even as early as high school,
Even as early as high school,
there was a sense of being isolated and left out,
there was a sense of being isolated and left out,
which sounds kind of similar
which sounds kind of similar
to being less relevant.
to being less relevant.
And it makes me feel like I'm going to explode.
It makes me feel like I'm going to explode.
I choose to honor and accept myself as best I can.
Choose to honor and accept myself best I can.
Let's going through the points now here and say, it feels like I'm going to explode.
Feels like I'm going to explode.
That's quite a feeling.
That's quite a feeling.
It's not a little sad,
It's not a little sad,
a little disappointed.
a little disappointed.
My body feels like it's going to explode.
It feels like it's going to explode.
So this is urgent.
So this is urgent.
This is not okay.
It's not okay.
Something about being left out and isolated
Something about left out and being left out and isolated
triggers this reaction in me.
triggers this reaction in me.
And that's not bad or wrong.
It's not bad or wrong.
It's there for a reason.
It's there for a reason.
My body is telling me something.
My body is telling me something.
All this energy is erupting
All the energy is erupting
like it's going to explode.
like it's going to explode.
And I'm curious what it might have been saying in that moment.
I'm curious what it might have been saying in that moment.
What all that energy was communicating.
What all that energy was communicating.
I'm just curious, not to repeat this after me. See if there is any type of response to that. What all that energy might have been meant or saying, so to speak.
Well, I feel a little bit calmer now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what the energy might have been saying. Yeah, maybe it was saying that I need to work harder. Maybe.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And so you definitely felt this physical reaction, and you'd say there was some interpretation at least that I should work harder.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And just feeling into that a little more and just saying, yeah, okay. Was the feeling I need to work harder, or was that the thought of what to do about the situation?
Yeah, I mean, that's my go-to, right? It's like, well, if I just need to roll up my sleeves and I just need to, man up
Good.
and just like practice harder and like send more emails and
Good. Okay.
like double check it more and sleep less and like, just
Yeah.
like, right? I mean, that's the only solution that I know of.
Beautiful. Okay.
It's work harder,
Yeah. Yeah. So
do better.
yeah. Yeah. So when I experienced this
When I experience this,
of being isolated,
being isolated,
being left out,
being like left out,
being less relevant,
being less relevant,
and the physical response
physical response is blowing
is,
up.
yeah, like I'm gonna explode. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's clearly not all that safe.
Clearly, it's not all that safe.
Maybe there's some hypervigilance,
Maybe hypervigilance.
but I have already learned.
I've already learned
Okay, when things feel bad,
when things feel bad,
when the situation is going this way,
when the situation is going this way,
when I'm perceived
when I'm perceived
as less than or less relevant in some way,
as less than or less relevant,
or just being left out in some way,
or just being left out,
it means it's time to get to work.
means it's time to get to work.
It's time to get to work.
Time to get to work.
I need to fix this.
I need to fix this.
This is not a good situation.
It's not a good situation.
And the solution is
Solution is
get to work,
get to work,
do more,
do more,
accomplish more.
accomplish more.
And that seemed like the logical solution.
It seemed logical.
If I get better,
If I get better,
there's less chance of being isolated.
less chance of being isolated.
Does that feel accurate?
Possibly.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if I always identify just with isolation, but usually it's like it's definitely a sense of losing security for sure.
Okay.
Definitely a sense of like not being able to survive, and then that kind of goes hand in hand with, well, if I can't provide for myself, I can't provide for my family, then my family will leave me.
Yeah.
Everybody else will see me as like a what's the word? A fraud, maybe that
Yeah.
too. And then so that does feel congruent with kind of being isolated. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Yeah. So I learned a long time ago
I learned a long time ago.
There is a very real threat
There's a very real threat
of being isolated,
of being isolated,
being abandoned.
being abandoned.
And in my adult life,
And in my adult life,
that could look all sorts of ways.
could look lots of ways.
No more followers,
No more followers.
or my views go way down.
Views go way down.
Chris's shit isn't cool anymore.
Chris's shit isn't cool anymore.
Sorry for the swearing, everyone. I do it sometimes. Yeah, not as relevant.
Not as relevant.
I need to get to work if that happens.
Need to get to work if that happens.
Maybe I need to always be working hard
Maybe I need to always be working hard
to prevent it from happening.
to prevent it from happening.
But I learned long ago
I learned long ago
there's a very real risk of this happening.
there's a very real risk of this happening.
I can be perceived
I can be perceived
as not as good
as not as good as
or not fitting in some way.
or not fitting in.
And then I'll be isolated.
Then I'll be isolated.
And back then it sucked,
Back then it sucked,
but at least it didn't mean I go broke.
but at least it didn't mean I would go broke.
Now if I'm left out,
Now if I'm left out,
now if I'm perceived
if I'm perceived
as less relevant
as less relevant,
or getting worse.
getting worse,
He-
not good.
Yeah, he used to be so killing.
I used to be killing. Yeah. I mean, people thought I was the shit, you know, and so if I don't have that, then what am I worth? Like, what do I have?
Yeah. Yeah, what
If
do
I
I
don't
have?
have, if I'm not virtuoso, if I'm not the fastest motherfucker on the planet, then maybe there's nothing of value left of me that anybody would find worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah, all this feeling
All this feeling.
that's my value.
That's my value, right?
That's my worth.
That's my worth.
And this goes way back
Goes way back.
to, yeah, I can be isolated and left out.
I could be isolated and left out.
But if I become exceptional,
But if I become exceptional,
that's a very wise strategy.
it's a strategy. It'll
And it
create
is.
security.
Yeah. And it worked.
And it worked.
I'm honoring that it actually was smart.
It was smart.
Because the reason anyone is watching this,
The reason anyone's watching this,
the reason I have a YouTube channel
reason I have a YouTube channel.
with 30,000 people on it.
Yeah. Or more. Close to 40.
Great, yeah. It's because I was exceptional.
Because I was exceptional.
I'm wondering if I still am.
Wondering if I still am. Was I
And
ever?
that's really scary. Yeah.
That's scary. Yeah.
Was I ever?
Was I ever?
But I was at least perceived as such.
At least perceived that way, yeah.
And I got validation
I got validation for that.
from awards. From awards,
From awards, yep.
from the gigs I got,
From gigs.
from people basically saying
People saying it. Yeah.
and putting their money where their mouth was
Putting their money where their mouth was.
by actually hiring me.
By hiring me.
I mean, that's how Evan and I met.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I was touring and playing gigs.
Yep.
And so this is my security.
This is my security.
This is my way to not be isolated.
It's my way to not be isolated.
So of course it's going to be true
So of course it's going to be true
that I care about this.
that I care about it.
And it's actually a bit naive
And naive,
to pretend it doesn't matter.
pretend that it doesn't matter.
Like, oh, my playing doesn't matter.
Like as if my playing doesn't matter. Or my teaching.
Yeah,
Or my emails.
right. Because it is my brand.
Because it's my brand.
It is perhaps why many people come to me.
Perhaps why people come to me.
I'm also open to exploring
I'm also open to exploring
a couple different things here.
a couple different things.
First of all,
First of all,
is it necessarily true
is it necessarily true
that fearing abandonment
that fearing abandonment
and isolation
and isolation
actually makes me play better?
makes me play better? Probably not, right?
Maybe, yeah.
I mean,
I
well,
don't know
it might
yet.
motivate me a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. It has been a motivator.
Yeah.
So I'm not telling myself this is true.
I'm not telling myself that's true.
I'm open to exploring it though.
I'm open to explore it.
And I don't have to, this is not black and white.
It's not black or white.
It's not to pretend I don't care,
Not to pretend I don't care,
but I am curious.
but I'm curious.
If this part of me that feels
If this part of me that feels
like if I am less virtuosic
like I'm less virtuosic
or less relevant,
or less relevant,
we need to remind Chris
we need to remind Chris
that it might all fall apart.
that it might all fall apart.
So he takes this really seriously.
So I take it really seriously.
Hey man, your whole livelihood depends on this.
Everything depends on it.
I can say I get it.
I can say, I get it.
I understand that this is really important.
I understand it's important,
But I'm allowed to question.
but I'm allowed to question
First of all, if it's actually true
if it's actually true
that all the value people get from me
that all the value people get from me
is based on whether I'm, the best.
is based on my, excellence.
Yeah. It could be the case
It could be.
that people value me for a lot of reasons.
It's possible people value me for other reasons.
It's possible that it's not the case.
It's possible that it's not all resting on how well I play over diminished chords.
And that they're not all on Instagram
That they're not all on Instagram.
shopping for who's better than Chris.
Yeah. Shopping for who's better than me, right?
Because then I should quit Chris's program and join theirs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because clearly there's got to be some better shit out there.
Yeah. And it's good that I can laugh at this.
It's good that I can laugh at this.
Because as silly as it might sound,
That's as silly as it might sound.
part of me was really concerned about that
Part of me is really concerned about it
because it was linked up for me.
because it was linked up for me.
If I'm not the best, I'm irrelevant
If I'm not the best, I'm irrelevant
or less relevant.
or less relevant.
And I could lose everything.
I could lose everything.
I choose to keep questioning that.
I choose to keep questioning that.
Yeah, there could be many, many reasons
Could be many reasons
beyond my virtuosity.
beyond my virtuosity. It could be many ways to just to be relevant, to be useful, to be connected, to provide value, to be found attractive, relevant, valuable, aside from playing dominant chords very fast and in tune.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also open to the possibility
And I'm also open to the possibility
that even though I may have experienced otherwise,
that even though I may have experienced otherwise,
in very real ways in my past,
real ways,
it may not be so black and white.
it may not be so black and white.
Like, okay, if my skills go down,
My skills go down,
they all abandon me.
that they all abandoned me.
Chris isn't cool anymore.
Right, that I'm not cool anymore. Right.
I understand how this may have been linked up.
I understand how it may have been linked up.
There's probably things even before this
Probably things before this.
where my body, mind, and nervous system
My body, mind, and nervous system
do associate
do associate
how hard I work
how hard I work
is how much I fit in.
is how much I fit in.
And
Yeah, I remember sixth grade. I was totally just a fat kid in sixth grade. I was and hand-me-down clothes and the rich kids, and I would go to orchestra, and the rich kids and because all the kids in the youth orchestra all had nice clothes, and they were rich kids. But I had hand-me-downs, and I had a homemade haircut, and I was fat, and I constantly felt like judged or made fun of or ostracized and all this thing. And then so then I played my way, kind of to like first chair and that kind of thing. That kind of brought that up for me. But yeah,
Wow, yeah, that's deep. Yeah. So I'm recognizing this.
recognizing this,
Everything that young kid went through.
everything that young kid went through,
How tough that must have been
how tough that was
to be judged.
to be judged
And in many ways judged for things
and judged for things
that I couldn't control.
that I couldn't control.
I couldn't make myself rich
I couldn't make myself rich
in sixth grade.
in sixth grade.
It's very powerless feeling.
It is very powerless feeling.
It's really cruel.
It's cruel.
Intellectually I might know.
Intellectually, I might know.
Yeah, kids can be that way.
Kids can be that way.
But in the moment,
But in the moment,
that's tough.
it was tough.
That's a tough thing to experience.
That's a tough thing to experience.
And I did something really smart.
I did something smart.
I found a strategy.
Found a strategy.
Here's something I can control.
Here's something I can control.
So this goes way back.
Goes way back.
This is very core to me.
Core to me.
I can play my way
I can play my way to first
to
chair.
being yep,
Get
to
respect.
to being accepted.
Yeah, even the girls wanted to go out with me once I could play.
Yep. Yep. I could
There
play
literally,
my
there
way.
would not have been a girl that ever wanted to go out with me if it wasn't for the fact that I was playing Paganini. I'm telling you, that was like any girl that ever was interested in me was because of my playing.
Okay. So my whole life rests on this.
So my whole life rests on this.
And this has been true for a long time.
Been true for a long time.
If my playing is exceptional,
If my playing is exceptional,
I become worthy of love.
I become worthy.
If my playing is first chair,
If it's first chair,
not third chair,
not third,
I need to be first chair
I need to be first chair.
before anyone would even consider me
Yeah.
liking me.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, holy shit.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
No wonder it feels.
no wonder I feel so stressed out like I want to explode.
Yeah. Because I need to be first chair,
Because I need a first chair. Yeah.
whatever that means on the internet.
Whatever that means on the internet. Yeah.
And it's always changing.
It's always changing.
It's really stressful.
That's stressful.
It's a lot to keep up with.
A lot to keep up with.
And there's more to look at here.
There's more to look at here.
And I can look at that in time.
And I can look at it in time.
But it's quite a realization.
But it's a good realization.
And I'm open to the possibility
I'm open to the possibility
that it's not true.
that it's not true.
That where I currently am,
That where I currently am,
in my 53-year-old reality,
in my 53-year-old reality,
it's not true
it's not true.
that if I'm not first chair,
That if I'm not first chair,
no one will accept me.
no one will accept me.
Lots of compassion for the kid
Lots of compassion for that sixth grader,
for whom that was actually true
for who it was true.
in his reality.
In his reality,
I'm open to the possibility
I'm open to the possibility
that he was always worthy and deserving.
that he was always worthy and deserving.
He may not have experienced that,
He may have not experienced it
and may need to process that a bit.
and may need to process it a little bit.
But just broadly speaking,
Just broadly speaking,
I'm open to this,
I'm open to it.
that it might not be true now.
It may not be true.
My whole business may not fall apart
I may be not susceptible to falling apart just
if
based
I'm
on
not the best.
if I'm not the best. Yeah, whatever that is.
That that some of that pressure might be able to release.
That I might be able to let some of that pressure go.
That I need to be the best to survive.
The pressure to be, however, whatever the best is, some super human musical level.
That's an enormous amount of pressure.
A lot of pressure.
It's hard to write emails from that place.
Hard to write emails from there. Yeah.
It's hard to practice from that place.
Hard to practice from that place.
I
Right?
do it
I do it
because I do what I need to do.
because I do what I need to do.
I always have.
Always have.
That's great.
That's great.
But maybe I don't need to feel dread while doing it.
But maybe I don't need to feel so much pressure about it. Maybe it would be better if I didn't.
Yeah. But it's understandable why I do.
But it's understandable why I do.
But I'm open to breaking this association.
But I'm open to breaking this association.
That if I'm not the best, I'm abandoned.
That if I'm not the best, I'll be abandoned.
And just having some compassion for myself in the process.
And having some compassion for myself in the process.
All right, let's just take a breath.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, Chris, just sit with that for a second and
All right,
don't jump right into host mode.
all right. I'll let you take.
Let you take a breath with that because I know you're going to kick right into gear, but let's let everyone else kind of process that and chime in for a second because I'm curious some of the comments and thoughts on what happened there, right? Can you see how in a pretty short amount of time you see that underneath all of it is a sixth grade, really child in sixth grade. I'm bad with correlating ages to grades, but it's young, right? Learning that I'm not really accepted or appreciated unless, and I can't control it, but I found something I can control. And when I get to first chair, suddenly a girl might actually date me. And they would never even consider liking me unless I was the best. Not okay, not kind of, yeah, I can play a little bit. Like I played my way to first chair. And that feeling of energy, explosion in the body, right? So can you see how as an adult, like my life is gonna fall apart if I'm not first place? If and the ambiguity of it now, right? The ambiguity of, oh, okay, but now how do you be first place? Right? It's more ambiguous now on the internet. It's more ambiguous in 2025. What is the best? Is it who just wins the downbeat polls or the whatever the classical version of the poll is, right? Does that even matter so much in 2025? There's some, like you said, some kid on Instagram who's doing something very creative, who's not even part of that world, who may be outshining things. So that can all be true, but when there's an association of as I start to lose um, rank, I might be slipping away from first chair, starts to feel like my life is falling apart, right? So um, I went deep fast, you know, if the person can do it, and Chris can, it's cool. You can see this is very, very different than like, okay, even though I don't even remember what the original what the original thing was, right? But it's like even though I'm feeling overwhelmed, right? Or how do I work on feeling less overwhelmed? Well, I don't have an answer to that, right? My answer is where does it come from? And that's how we explore it. So and that's broadly speaking. And you know, like I said, there's people with much more experience than me. There's all sorts of different modalities. There's different ways of approaching it. This is just my particular approach, my particular framework of the whole thing. Small amount of inner child, like not full on inner child work there, but a little bit. And when you can find that, that's very helpful. So yeah, just kind of sharing all that while Chris gets a moment to, you know, absorb that. And I am curious if you have questions, comments, anyone. I think there was a comment on YouTube. One of the measures of success of a teacher that I see on social media is the successes of their students. Yeah. I would love to hear if Chris was saying in the chat. I would love to hear if anyone has any takeaways or things you find relevant. Got some comments here, and there's something here on YouTube. Oh, thank you, Kristen. Says, Evan, you're an amazing facilitator. Chris, thank you for sharing such amazing content. This was so timely and valuable for me. Thanks also for sharing your personal experiences. I can relate. Yes, yes. Thanks very much, Chris, for being willing to share those personal things. And I think we all can relate, maybe not to the exact specific details, but I'm sorry I forgot to mention to everyone that you tap along and you do it, even while the other person is talking about things that may have no seeming relevance to your life. They call it borrowing benefits, and your brain is going to adapt the details to your own situation. So like in a group context, you can tap along, you can watch the recording if you felt any emotion during this, and it doesn't matter if it's someone else tapping through, you're still going to get benefit, surprising amount of benefit sometimes. In fact, most of the time from doing it. So
Yeah, and you guys, you should know that Evan has hundreds of free taps on his YouTube channel. It's called Inner Work with Evan. Inner Work with Evan. One of the things Evan has shared with me about this is that we have inner conflict. So an inner conflict could be like, I really want to practice, but I don't want to practice. Or I need to make a sales call, but I feel too afraid to do it. Or I need to play this concert, but I don't want to. You know, I want to start improvising and learning more about harmony, but I'm so scared to do it. Inner conflict. You want to do something, but you don't want to do something. And I feel like we get so many more inner conflict messages because we receive mutually exclusive messages all the time. Win at all costs. Be fair. Right? Make tons of money and be the best. No, just be a kind person. Like inner conflict is just endemic in our everyday existence. And reconciling mutually exclusive value statements. It's almost like the feeling of being quote unquote schizophrenic. How can you subscribe to these mutually exclusive things, right? And trying to find a way to transcend those mutually exclusive energies, conflicting desires, And so that's the way I understand it. Evan is giving us a tool to be able to deal with that. When we feel like we're going to explode, when we feel like we're going to tune out, when we feel like we can't stop crying, when we feel like, we're just wincing with shame and embarrassment, or timidity, or just, procrastination, or you can't let this thing go because it's not good enough. And I feel these things all the time. Just what I just shared with Evan was just like one, recurring theme. But I don't know how the best way to wrap this is, Evan. I just want to give everybody here, I think we should wrap, but I want everybody to share any takeaways that you got from this. Please share them in the chat. If you don't want to share it publicly, then share it with us in the private chat. It's very valuable to us. I know it's valuable to Evan because he's really dedicated to continuing to improve this. And check out his free YouTube channel. We've got a special tap that we prepared for you that's free. Of course, if you're already in the Creative Strings Academy, you get access to our full course. You're welcome to join it. Try it for a month. We've got a link for you. I'll post some of those links while I turn the mic back over to Evan. Let him wrap this
Yeah,
up.
thanks everybody. And I saw a couple thanks Catherine, saying I cooled down emotional moments. Yeah. There was a question, how often do you recommend doing this? If by this you mean just like tapping on the points, I don't think you can really overdo that. Just kind of listen to your body. As far as, like if you mean kind of going deep and working with someone, for example, let the practitioner and your own responses to that guide you. I don't recommend like forcing it. If you find yourself like, I know there's something I really feel like I should, that's not a great word, but there's something here I want to work on and I find myself kind of like avoiding it, that could be a good time to, okay, I'm going to set some dedicated time to like tap along with a video or, work with someone. But just the straightforward, actual, just tapping itself, there's no, do it every day if you can, even if it's just a couple moments and even if you're just tapping on the points, because it's something you can start to integrate. I do it so automatic. I think even times during the introduction, I just started doing this. My body just kind of does it at this point. But, I don't think anything can go wrong from it because I do it an excessive amount. Like do it for myself. I work with people many days of the week and such. So to actually, if you can tap every day, it's great. If you're talking about like doing deeper work, yeah, maybe a week or a month, depending on how it feels for you and how deep it's going. I think listening to your body and your intuition as far as that goes. It's not like a hard and fast rule. At least people I work with, I don't have a formula like that. Bruce Springsteen said the definition of being an adult is the ability to hold two different realities in your mind at the same time without it driving you crazy. Yep, very relatable. And Chris put some things in the chat. And yes, there's lots of other EFT practitioners on YouTube as well doing videos. Suzanne, I'm almost positive I've seen on there. Yep, Suzanne's on there. You can tap along with her. It's nice to tap along with videos and stuff too. That way you don't have to really think about what to say, but you can also just tap the points, and you can almost think of it like verbal journaling. as well, like just saying what I feel. I'm got this gig coming up. I'm really stressed about it. I don't feel like I'm overwhelmed. I got so much to practice, right? Whether you vocalize it or not. So you can't really do it wrong. You can tap on the wrong points, so to speak. That has been shown in studies. It is worth, just look at a YouTube video, look at a diagram, and tap on the actual points. Don't just like do this, which you'll see some people do. There is a
Evan,
measurable difference.
some of the people that I invited here, and I noticed that some of them here are teachers. They teach, kids in classrooms. And
Cool.
I had specifically invited some people here because I think the social emotional learning is a buzzword in for teachers these days. And I think the music classroom is one of the best places to bring this type of practice. And so I'm guessing you would recommend for teachers here, music teachers, how they can start to bring it, not only for themselves as dealing with stress as teachers, but also how they can bring it to their students. Do you have any suggestions on that?
Yeah, there's definitely some people I would recommend perhaps checking out. Suzanne might know some things too, because there are people who that's their bread and butter, and they have experience working with kids. I do have one interview on my channel with a mentor, meaning a mentor in the program that learned, I got certification from. I learned tapping some time ago. If you type in Fei Chan, like EFT Evan or Fei Chan Evan, Faychan. She does a lot of tapping with kids specifically, and in that interview, she talks a lot about some of the specific strategies, and there's some back and forth with her and I about like me asking questions about the way to approach it with kids, and depending on what your beliefs are as far as like how coincidences quote unquote work, like a day or like 2 days after I did that interview with her, I don't mean released, it wasn't published yet. I got an email like 2 days after that conversation with her. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I was taking notes and stuff. I get an email from someone's like, hey, would you be willing to tap with my like 6-year-old child? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I messaged Faye. I'm like, can you believe this? Right after you explained to me how to do this and how to approach it. But yeah, I have no classroom experience teaching with young kids. So I would definitely, I think it's best to go like research or talk to the people that have experience with it. Yeah, Tappy Bear. I think they don't sell that anymore, but you can use like stuffed animals and things like that. Yep, Brad Yates has a few books on EFT with kids. Um, Brad Yates has hundreds of videos on YouTube. Um, Probably 1,000 at this point. And next month, March 13th, um, I am going to be on his channel doing something called tag team tapping, where he and I are we're going to be live on his channel, and people are going to chat in like you are, and we're going to go back and forth. And he's probably the biggest YouTube tapping channel. So I am slightly intimidated by that. I am looking forward to that. If y'all want to come and support me in that, and that would be awesome. But yeah, any other questions? Otherwise, we can wrap it up. Yep, meditation and guided meditation in the classroom is so beneficial. I will say that from talking to Faye and working with the one child I have, kids are extremely receptive to it, and it's somatic, right? Like your body is involved. So this is way easier to get a child to do than to like, okay, sit eyes closed in a lotus position or something, right? And as long as you're tapping the point, it doesn't matter if they're rocking or moving. It doesn't matter if they're maintaining eye contact, right? These are some useful things to know. It's not sit still, be quiet, do the tapping. It's not, you do not have to treat it like homework, right? They're very responsive to it. It's just the physical thing. Let them be free flowing and creative with it. Cool. Anything else? Anybody? Otherwise, we can
I just want to
wrap it up.
acknowledge Evan. Thank you
Oh,
so much
thanks,
for
man.
making yourself available to do this and giving your energy and wisdom and compassion. And specifically, I want to say I learned so much from you because I know that you, in one regard, because I know you to be a very conscientious musician, like incredibly skilled incredibly supportive musician on the bandstand, incredibly prepared musician, conscientious musician. And I also see that you bring this into your qualities as a human being, always compassionate,
Oh, thanks, man.
always listening. You model to me a great, amazing model of a masculine man who is very open, very gentle, very compassionate, very where people can feel comfortable, where I can feel comfortable in your presence. It's incredible. I want to acknowledge you for it. Thank you
Mm.
for giving this to me and to our community.
Oh, thanks so much, man. There's a lot of good things I have to say about you as well. Absolutely. For years now, and I don't think I wouldn't be doing this without Chris. Be clear about that very specifically. Like I was not comfortable with bringing this into the music world. I was very self-conscious about presenting this as a musician, right? I was okay with the people that were already tapping and keeping this very private and isolated, and Chris is really the one that encouraged me to feel okay. I don't know why I thought musicians would think this was weird and think less of me. Said we all have our stuff, right? So thank you, Chris, for this would not exist without Chris. So thanks for the nice comments in the chat, and yeah, thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day, evening, week. Take care. Maybe see you in the academy.